I crave you every second, and I'll prove my love forever. Your touch sets me on fire, and I'm helpless to resist. Hi, my very loyal and beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. How are you, my beautiful family? May God bless each and every one of you. Let's begin with a powerful prayer, my family. Heavenly Father, you are our strength, our healer, and our guide. Today, I lift up my beautiful family to you. Bless them with unshakable faith, endless joy, and unstoppable success. Let no darkness touch their hearts, no struggle break their spirit. Pour your favor upon them, and let miracles flow in their lives. Amen. Are you happy with my stories, my family? Do you remember our goal? 20,000 completions by March 31st. My beautiful family, don't forget to like, share, and comment on this video because only your love and support can bring us back to where we belong. I've been busy due to my treatment, but now it's your responsibility to help this channel rise again. I believe in you, my family. We will rise again. Nothing can stop us because we are one family, united by love and faith. No matter the challenges, we will stand strong, and together we will bring this channel back to its full glory, stronger than ever before. Now, James will start the story for you. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. This version keeps your message powerful, emotional, and motivating while staying true to your heartfelt style. Let me know if you want any changes, my brother.
Chapter 1. Canvas of Dreams. The scent of oils and turpentine filled Ava Sinclair's studio as morning light spilled through the industrial windows. Her fingers were stained with cerulean blue and burnt sienna, matching the ocean scene taking form on her canvas. In 12 hours, these walls would empty, and her soul would be on display for New York's elite art world to judge. "You're fretting again," she murmured to herself, her grandmother's voice echoing in her mind. "The only opinion that matters is the one that comes from your heart, child." Ava stepped back, tilting her head to examine the centerpiece of her collection, a self-portrait unlike any she'd created before. In it, she stood at the edge of a cliff, her back to the viewer, gazing out at a turbulent ocean. Her hair, a crown of natural curls, caught in an invisible wind. It was the only piece not for sale, though her agent had argued vehemently against this decision. "They'll pay a fortune for this one," Marcus had insisted during his last visit. "Some things aren't meant to be bought," Ava had replied, remembering how her grandmother had refused to sell the family's small plot of land even when developers came offering life-changing sums. The face in the mirror looked back with determined dark eyes, framed by thick lashes. At 32, Ava carried herself with a quiet confidence earned through years of proving skeptics wrong. The hot shower washed away paint residue, but couldn't touch the anxiety bubbling beneath her composed exterior. This showing wasn't just another career milestone. It represented vindication for every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every no she'd transformed into fuel for her ambition. As steam clouded the mirror, Ava's thoughts drifted to her childhood home in Willow Creek, Georgia, a modest house with a wraparound porch where her grandmother, Eleonora, had taught her to recognize beauty in the ordinary. After losing her parents in a car accident at age 7, that porch had become Ava's sanctuary and classroom. "Love is like art, Ava girl," Eleonora would say, her hands weathered but gentle as they guided Ava's small fingers across sketch pads. "It requires patience, honesty, and courage. Never settle for a pale imitation of either." Ava selected a burnt orange dress that complemented her deep brown skin and fit her curvy figure without apology. The color reminded her of autumn sunsets over Willow Creek, of her grandmother's sweet potato pie cooling on the windowsill. "You'd be proud, Nora," she whispered as she zipped the dress. 4 years had passed since her grandmother's death, but the ache remained, a hollow space that success couldn't fill. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe, her closest friend since art school. Stop overthinking. Your work is brilliant, you look gorgeous, and tonight is your night. I'm bringing the emergency flask. By 5:30, Ava was in a taxi heading toward Chelsea, her portfolio carefully documented in the tablet on her lap. Manhattan pulsed around her, all concrete ambition and steel dreams. 6 years in the city, and sometimes it still felt foreign to a girl raised amid Georgia pines and cicada songs. Looking out at the passing buildings, she remembered her grandmother's words when she'd announced her acceptance to Parsons. Cities don't care if you succeed or fail, child. They just keep moving. It's people who remember, so find yourself some good ones. Zoe had been the first good one, followed by Marcus, her agent, and a small circle of fellow artists. But intimate connections, the kind that reached beyond friendship into something deeper, those had proven elusive. Men either found her success intimidating or fetishized her as some exotic art world anomaly. The few relationships she'd attempted had fizzled when partners discovered that her passion for painting wasn't a cute hobby, but a consuming vocation. "Here we are, miss," the driver announced, pulling up to Helios Gallery's sleek facade. Ava paid and stepped onto the sidewalk, smoothing her dress as a flutter of nerves danced in her stomach. Through the gallery's glass front, she could see white walls already adorned with her work. 2 years of her life distilled into 14 canvases that charted a journey from grief to self-discovery. "There she is," Marcus called, striding toward her in his signature black attire. "The woman of the hour." He kissed both her cheeks, his enthusiasm palpable. At 58, Marcus Klein had the energy of someone half his age and a reputation for spotting talent before the market caught on. "We've already had inquiries about price points," he said, guiding her inside. "The Times critic is coming and Vogue wants to feature you in their Artists to Watch spread." The gallery buzzed with staff making final adjustments. Soft track lighting highlighted each piece, creating intimate viewing spaces within the open floor plan. Ava moved slowly around the room, seeing her work with fresh eyes, each canvas a chapter in a visual autobiography she'd never intended to write. "Your grandmother would be bursting with pride," Zoe said, appearing beside her in a silver jumpsuit, champagne flute in hand. "She'd say I'm charging too much," Ava laughed, accepting the glass Zoe offered. "She'd be right, and then she'd tell you to charge more." After the guests departed, Ava remained in the empty gallery, surrounded by her work. One painting remained covered, the commission he'd requested months ago about the meaning of love. Ava excused herself and walked to her self-portrait, hung on the back wall where it commanded its own space. In the painting, her figure stood at the precipice, not in fear but in yearning. For what, she hadn't been entirely sure when creating it. Connection, perhaps. The kind of love her grandmother had described, unwavering and profound. Something that transcended transactions, that couldn't be quantified or purchased. "What are you waiting for?" she whispered to her painted self. The gallery doors opened and the space quickly filled with art world luminaries, critics, collectors, and curious patrons drawn by the buzz surrounding her work. Ava moved through the crowd, graciously accepting congratulations while explaining her process and inspiration when asked. By 8 o'clock, red dots marked 12 of her 13 available paintings. Success beyond anything she'd dared hope for. "I need some air," she said, slipping toward the small balcony at the back of the gallery. Outside, the night air carried a hint of autumn crispness. Below, New York continued its relentless rhythm, unconcerned with individual triumphs or disappointments. Ava leaned against the railing, finally allowing herself to acknowledge what lingered beneath her professional satisfaction, a profound loneliness that success couldn't touch. "Congratulations, Ms. Sinclair," a deep voice said from behind her. "Your work is extraordinary." Ava turned to find an unfamiliar man in a perfectly tailored suit. She'd been approached by collectors all evening, But something about this one, his intensity perhaps, made her straighten her shoulders. "Thank you," she replied simply. He extended a business card between two fingers. "I'd like to discuss a private commission if you're interested." Ava accepted the card, noting the minimalist design with a single name, Sebastian Hawthorne. "I don't typically take private commissions," she said, though Marcus would be horrified to hear her turn away a potential client. A slight smile crossed the man's face, not the entitlement she often saw from wealthy patrons, but something more considered. "Perhaps you'll make an exception," he said, his gaze unwavering. "I believe we might have something valuable to offer each other." Before Ava could respond, Zoe appeared at the doorway. "Ava, the Times critic wants a word." With a nod to the mysterious Sebastian Hawthorne, Ava slipped the card into her clutch and returned to her triumph, unaware that the ocean from her self-portrait had just walked into her life. Chapter 2. The Man Behind the Fortune. Sebastian Hawthorne despised art galleries, the pretension, the social choreography, the hollow conversations about perspective and negative space from people who collected paintings like stocks, acquiring rather than appreciating. Yet here he was, navigating the crowd at Helios Gallery because Lawrence Stanfield had insisted this emerging artist was revolutionary. Sebastian doubted that. In his experience, revolution rarely came packaged in critical acclaim and champagne receptions. "Mr. Hawthorne, what a pleasant surprise." Helena Richmond, the gallery owner, approached with practiced warmth. "I didn't realize you collected contemporary art." "I'm expanding my horizons," Sebastian replied, his tone neutral but polite. At 38, he'd perfected the art of revealing nothing while seeming engaged. "Let me introduce you to the artist." "Perhaps later," he interjected smoothly. "I'd prefer to experience the work without preconceptions." Alone again, Sebastian moved through the space methodically, hands clasped behind his back. He recognized the technical skill in the paintings, vivid colors, masterful brushwork, but felt nothing until he reached the back wall. There, a solitary figure stood at the edge of a cliff, dark curls caught in the wind, gazing out at a tumultuous ocean. Something in the woman's posture, strength mingled with longing, stopped him cold. Unlike the other pieces, this one bore no price tag, just the title, "What Remains Unsaid." For the first time that evening, Sebastian forgot himself, forgot the business connections he was meant to be cultivating. He simply stood, transfixed by the honesty radiating from the canvas. "Powerful, isn't it?" a silver-haired man commented, sidling up beside him. "I'm Marcus Klein, Miss Sinclair's agent." Sebastian collected himself. "It differs from her other work. Ava refuses to sell this one," Marcus confided. "Says some things aren't meant to be bought." He chuckled. "Such idealism is charming, if financially impractical." Sebastian's interest sharpened at this detail. In his world, everything had a price. The concept of something deliberately withheld from the marketplace was unexpected. "Tell me about her," he said, his gaze still on the painting. Marcus launched into practiced promotion. Parsons graduate, meteoric rise, authentic voice in a derivative field. Sebastian half listened, more intrigued by what remained unspoken. The painting conveyed something the agent's polished narrative missed, a solitude Sebastian recognized intimately. When he spotted a woman in burnt orange stepping onto a balcony, Sebastian knew instinctively it was the artist. Excusing himself, he followed. The brief exchange with Ava Sinclair left him intrigued. She'd been neither impressed nor intimidated by him, a rarity in his experience. Her refusal of his commission request, casual yet firm, suggested a woman who set her own terms. Back in his Bentley, Sebastian examined her other paintings via the digital catalog on his tablet. Each piece revealed technical mastery and emotional intelligence, But that self-portrait lingered in his mind, the yearning in that silhouette against turbulent waters. "Home, sir?" his driver asked. Sebastian considered. The penthouse awaiting him was immaculate, designed by a renowned architect, filled with museum-quality furnishings, and utterly devoid of life. Not yet, James. The office. At 10:30 p.m., Hawthorne Tower stood mostly dark, but the 44th floor where Sebastian worked remained illuminated. His executive assistant, Diana Chen, looked up from her desk as he entered, unsurprised by his late arrival. "How was the gallery?" she asked, handing him messages. "Unexpectedly interesting. I need information on an artist named Ava Sinclair." Diana nodded, making a note. "Anything specific?" "Everything. Background, education, career trajectory, and I want all her available work purchased immediately." "All of it?" Diana's composure slipped momentarily. "Everything for sale," Sebastian clarified, "and arrange a meeting with her about a commission." In his private office, Sebastian loosened his tie and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan glittering below, a kingdom he'd expanded considerably since inheriting Hawthorne Industries at 25. The empire had cost him, though not in ways financial analysts could quantify. 13 years of 16-hour days had built a corporation worth billions, but left little space for connections that couldn't be documented in contracts or quarterly reports. Sebastian's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Beatrice Gala mentioned seeing you at that gallery opening. Dinner tomorrow? Eleanor Bradford will be there, recently divorced, on the museum board. Perfect for you." He didn't bother responding. Victoria Hawthorne's matchmaking efforts invariably involved women from the same privileged sphere, elegant, accomplished, and ultimately interested in what his name and fortune could provide. Diana knocked and entered with a folder. "Preliminary information on Ava Sinclair," she said. "More comprehensive research will be available tomorrow." Sebastian scanned the document. Birth date, education, exhibition history. Her family. Parents deceased when she was 7, raised by her grandmother in Georgia. The grandmother passed 4 years ago. Something tightened in Sebastian's chest. He'd lost his father at 12, but unlike Ava, had never known genuine familial warmth. Richard Hawthorne had been a business titan first, a father second, raising his son with the clinical detachment of a man grooming his successor rather than nurturing a child. "Arrange the art purchases anonymously," Sebastian instructed, "and schedule that meeting for next week." When Diana left, Sebastian returned to the window, scotch warming his throat. Below, millions of lives unfolded in lit windows and darkened streets. How many were like him, surrounded by abundance, yet fundamentally alone? His thoughts returned to Ava's self-portrait, to that solitary figure poised between earth and sky. What was she searching for in that painted horizon? The following morning, Sebastian woke in his penthouse at precisely 5:30 a.m. His bedroom, like the rest of the apartment, was a study in monochromatic masculinity: charcoal grays, midnight blues, black accents. Designed by a celebrated minimalist, the space reflected discipline rather than personality. He completed his usual routine: 5-mile run on the treadmill, protein shake, shower, with military precision. By 7:15, he was reviewing market reports in the back of his car while James navigated morning traffic. "Diana called," James informed him. "Ms. Sinclair has agreed to meet regarding the commission, but insists on conducting the meeting at her studio rather than your office." Sebastian's eyebrow rose slightly. Most people eagerly accepted invitations to Hawthorne Tower, the prestige of being summoned to his domain. This woman continued to defy expectations. "Fine," he said. "Arrange it." Arriving at his office, Sebastian found Diana at her desk, looking pleased with herself. "The purchases have been completed," she reported. 13 pieces, all acquired through intermediaries. The gallery was quite impressed with the anonymous collector's enthusiasm. And Miss Sinclair's reaction? According to my source, she was surprised but not particularly emotional about the sale. She did ask if the buyer had purchased her self-portrait as well, and seemed relieved to hear they hadn't tried. During the board meeting that morning, Sebastian found his thoughts drifting to the forthcoming studio visit. What kind of commission could draw out the raw emotion he'd glimpsed in her self-portrait? What would it take to convince Ava Sinclair to paint something specifically for him, something equally revealing and powerful? Lawrence Stanfield interrupted his musings. "Sebastian, your thoughts on the Shanghai expansion?" Instantly alert, Sebastian delivered a comprehensive assessment of the Asian market that impressed even the skeptics on his board. No one would guess his mind had been elsewhere moments before. As the Bentley crossed the Brooklyn Bridge days later, Sebastian studied the shifting patterns of light on the East River. For reasons he couldn't articulate, this meeting felt significant. Not in the way business dealings were significant, but in some deeper, less familiar territory. The car stopped before a converted warehouse in a gentrifying industrial area. Unlike the sleek gallery in Chelsea, this building spoke of authenticity rather than pretense, brick and iron, history and substance. "Wait here," Sebastian instructed James, stepping out into the crisp afternoon. At the entrance, he pressed the intercom for Unit 3B and heard Ava Sinclair's voice, clear, confident, unimpressed by the wealthy stranger at her door. "Come up," she said simply. Sebastian climbed the stairs, each step taking him further from his familiar world of boardrooms and bespoke luxury. For the first time in years, he felt something like uncertainty, even vulnerability. At the third floor, a steel door stood ajar. Sebastian paused, momentarily hesitant, then pushed it open to find Ava Sinclair waiting, a splash of vibrant color against the industrial backdrop of her studio, regarding him with eyes that seemed to see beyond his carefully constructed facade. "Mr. Hawthorne," she acknowledged, neither smiling nor frowning. "You wanted to discuss a commission." Sebastian stepped into her space, her world, feeling strangely as though he stood at the edge of a cliff, much like the one in her painting, about to step into uncharted territory. Chapter 3. Collision of Worlds. Ava watched Sebastian Hawthorne enter her studio with the careful assessment she typically reserved for evaluating canvases. His presence immediately altered the energy of her space, like introducing a sleek, modern sculpture into a room of handcrafted pottery. "You're the anonymous buyer," she said, not a question but a realization. A hint of surprise crossed his face before he regained his composure. "I prefer to keep my acquisitions private." "All 13 pieces," Ava noted, crossing her arms. "Why?" Sebastian surveyed the studio. High ceilings, exposed brick, north-facing windows streaming with afternoon light. Canvases in various stages of completion leaned against walls. The space smelled of linseed oil and possibility. "Your work speaks to me," he said simply. Ava's eyebrow arched skeptically. "And what does it say, Mr. Hawthorne?" "Sebastian," he corrected, moving toward an unfinished painting. "It says you understand loneliness even in crowded rooms. It says you see beauty in imperfection." His fingers hovered near the canvas without touching it. "It says you're searching for something most people have stopped believing exists." The accuracy of his assessment unnerved her. "You've done your research." "I'm thorough." "So I've heard." "Coffee?" she offered, less from hospitality than a need to recalibrate this unexpected dynamic. Sebastian nodded, following her to the small kitchenette tucked in the corner of the loft. Unlike the impeccable man before her, Ava moved with casual confidence, comfortable in paint-splattered jeans and a loose emerald sweater that complemented her skin tone. "Black, I assume?" she asked, pouring from a French press. "You assume correctly." Their fingers brushed as she handed him the mug, brief contact that shouldn't have registered but somehow did. Ava retreated to the worn leather sofa, gesturing for him to join her. "So, this commission," she prompted, cradling her coffee. "I rarely accept them. Yet you agreed to meet." "Curiosity," she admitted. "It's not every day someone buys an entire collection and then wants more." Sebastian's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes, a flash of vulnerability quickly masked, caught her attention. "I want something different," he said. "Not for my corporate offices or to impress dinner guests. Something personal." "All art is personal, Mr. Haw, Sebastian." "But not all art is honest," he countered. "Your self-portrait, the one you wouldn't sell, that was honest." Ava stiffened. "What exactly are you proposing?" Sebastian set down his mug. "I want you to paint what love means to you." The request hung in the air between them, unexpected and disarming. Ava had anticipated requests for decorative pieces to match expensive furniture, not this invitation to expose her innermost thoughts. That's unconventional. "Is convention what drives your work?" he challenged. "No," Ava admitted. "But why that subject? Why me?" Sebastian stood, moving to the window where late afternoon light sculpted his profile. "Because I suspect you still believe in it despite evidence to the contrary. Because your grandmother taught you love should be, how did that interview put it? Pure, passionate, and unwavering." Ava set down her mug with more force than intended. "You've been quite thorough with your research. I told you I'm interested in honesty. Your work has it. Most people don't." "And what does Sebastian Hawthorne know about love?" she challenged, rising to face him. "The man who builds empires but lives alone in a penthouse overlooking a city he doesn't actually see." Instead of offense, something like respect flickered in his expression. "Apparently, you've done some research as well." "Google exists," Ava shrugged. "And my agent warned me about you." "Warned? That you collect beautiful things like trophies, that you're used to getting what you want." Sebastian stepped closer, his cologne subtle but distinctive. "And what is it you think I want, Miss Sinclair?" "Ava," she corrected, refusing to be intimidated by his proximity. "And I don't know yet, but I don't think it's just a painting." Their standoff lasted several heartbeats, his cool gray eyes meeting her warm brown ones without retreat. "Perhaps," Sebastian finally conceded, "but the commission remains genuine. Your interpretation of love, all its complexity, its contradiction, no constraints but your own vision." "And the fee?" Ava asked, though she knew discussing money was considered gauche in his circles. "Name it." 20,000, she said, doubling her usual rate, testing his commitment. 50, he countered without hesitation, with complete creative freedom. Ava blinked, momentarily disarmed by his generosity and the unexpected power he was ceding. "Why?" she asked again, genuinely curious now. Sebastian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Because I want to see how someone who still believes in love would paint it." The implication that he didn't, or couldn't, stirred something in Ava, a mixture of professional challenge and unexpected compassion. "You'll need to sit for me," she said. "Not for the painting itself, but so I can understand what I'm working with." "Working with?" "The commission isn't just about my perspective. It's about creating something that speaks to you as well." Ava moved to her calendar. "Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 hours each session for the next month." Sebastian consulted his phone. "My assistant will need to rearrange." "Non-negotiable," Ava interrupted. "If you want this piece, you make the time yourself. No assistance, no rescheduling unless it's an emergency. This isn't a business transaction you can delegate." She expected resistance, perhaps indignation at her presumption. Instead, Sebastian pocketed his phone and nodded. Agreed. Starting next Tuesday at 4 o'clock, Ava finished. And wear something comfortable. This isn't a boardroom. As Sebastian prepared to leave, he paused by her self-portrait, which rested on an easel in the corner. "What were you looking for?" he asked quietly. "When you painted this?" Ava joined him, studying her own work with fresh eyes. "Something real," she answered honestly. "Something that can't be bought or sold or quantified." "And have you found it?" The question lingered between them, unexpectedly intimate. "Not yet," she admitted, "but I'm still looking." Sebastian's gaze held hers, an unspoken understanding passing between them, two souls recognizing a similar hunger despite their different worlds. "Tuesday at 4, he confirmed, extending his hand. Ava accepted it, noting the controlled strength in his grip, the unexpected calluses on a billionaire's palm, and most disconcertingly, the subtle current that passed between them at the contact. "Tuesday at 4, she echoed. As the door closed behind him, Ava released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For the first time since her grandmother's death, she felt something stir in her chest that wasn't grief or ambition or creative drive, something foreign yet familiar, dangerous yet compelling. She turned back to her self-portrait, to the woman gazing at the distant horizon, and wondered if the ocean she'd been searching had somehow walked into her studio, disguised as a man who collected art but seemed to have forgotten how to truly see. Chapter 4. Beyond the Surface. Sebastian arrived at Ava's studio precisely at 4 o'clock the following Tuesday, trading his usual business attire for dark jeans and a charcoal cashmere sweater. He'd dismissed his driver for the afternoon, a decision that had visibly surprised James, and walked the final 3 blocks to the converted warehouse. His phone had buzzed incessantly throughout the day with matters his executive team deemed urgent. For the first time in years, Sebastian had silenced it completely during the final hour before his appointment. Diana's expression when he'd announced he was unavailable for the remainder of the afternoon had been a mixture of confusion and concern, emotions he typically associated with corporate takeovers, not art commissions. Ava opened the door at his knock, her hair pulled back in a loose knot, smudges of paint on her forearms. "You're punctual," she observed, stepping aside to let him enter. "A habit," Sebastian replied, taking in the transformed space. She'd rearranged the studio since his last visit, clearing the center, positioning 2 chairs near the north-facing windows, setting up a large blank canvas on an easel. "I won't be painting you," Ava clarified, noting his glance toward the easel. "But I need to understand who I'm creating this for." She gestured toward a chair. On the small table beside it sat a steaming mug of coffee, black as he preferred. The thoughtfulness of this small detail caught Sebastian off guard. "These sessions," he began, remaining standing, "what exactly do they entail?" Ava's lips curved slightly. "Nervous, Mr. Hawthorne." "Cautious," he amended. "I prefer clarity in all transactions." "This isn't a transaction," she reminded him. "It's a creative process. We'll talk. I'll sketch sometimes, make notes. I need to understand how you see the world before I can create something that will speak to you." Sebastian nodded, finally taking the offered seat. "Efficient." "Necessary," Ava countered, settling into the chair opposite him. She picked up a sketch pad and charcoal pencil. "Tell me about the first time you fell in love." The directness of the question, no preamble, no gentle introduction, was so unexpected that Sebastian nearly laughed. "You don't ease into things, do you? Would you prefer small talk about the weather?" Ava's pencil moved across the paper, her eyes studying his face with unnerving focus. "You commissioned a painting about love that requires honesty, not politeness." Sebastian considered deflection, the diplomatic half-truths he employed in board meetings and press interviews. But something about Ava's straightforward gaze made such tactics seem suddenly inadequate. "Alexandra Reinhardt," he said finally. "I was 19, sophomore year at Yale. She was studying comparative literature, brilliant, fearless. She saw the world as this vast tapestry of stories waiting to be discovered." Sebastian paused, surprised by how easily the memory surfaced after nearly 2 decades. "She was the first person who made me question the path my father had laid out for me." "What happened?" Ava asked, her pencil never ceasing its movement. "Reality happened. My father died unexpectedly. I had to take over Hawthorne Industries. Alexandra wanted to spend a year in Prague studying Kafka. Our worlds diverged." "You didn't try to make it work?" "I was 21, suddenly responsible for thousands of employees and hundreds of millions in assets." Sebastian's tone remained even, factual. "Alexandra deserved more than whatever fragments of attention I could spare between crisis meetings." Ava looked up from her sketch. "You decided that for her." The quiet challenge in her question caught him off guard. Most people accepted his narrative without question. The dutiful son sacrificing personal happiness for professional responsibility. "I made a rational decision," Sebastian replied. "One that respected the reality of our situation." Ava continued sketching. "And since then, I've had relationships." "Love," she clarified. "Not relationships." Sebastian's jaw tightened slightly. "In my experience, those are different categories." Ava set down her pencil, studying him with the same intensity she might apply to a complex composition. "That's telling." "Is this psychoanalysis part of your standard creative process?" Sebastian asked, an edge creeping into his voice. "Only when the subject demands it." Ava rose, moving to a small cabinet, from which she retrieved 2 glasses and a bottle of bourbon. "This might help." She poured 2 fingers in each glass, offering one to Sebastian. He accepted, their fingers brushing momentarily in the exchange. "Your turn," he said after taking a sip, the liquor warming his throat. "Fair exchange." Ava smiled slightly, acknowledging the turnabout. "Michael Caravaggio. Not the painter, though that would have been appropriate. A jazz musician I met during my 2nd year at Parsons. He played saxophone at a club in Harlem where I'd go to sketch late at night." "What drew you to him?" "His music spoke a language I was trying to capture in my paintings. Raw, honest, uncompromising." Ava's expression softened with the memory. "And he saw me. Not just my work or my appearance, but me. The first time he looked at one of my sketches, he said, 'You paint what people are afraid to say out loud.'" Sebastian found himself leaning forward slightly. "What happened?" "He got an opportunity to tour with a famous quartet. I was still finding my voice as an artist." Her shoulders lifted in a small shrug that didn't quite mask the old hurt. "He asked me to come with him. I couldn't leave my studies, my first real chance at building a career." "You chose your art," Sebastian observed. "I chose myself," Ava corrected. "There's a difference." The distinction resonated unexpectedly with Sebastian. He'd always framed his choices as obligations to the company, to his father's legacy, to the shareholders, never as choices for himself. "What about your family?" Ava asked, returning to her sketch. "Tell me about them." Sebastian tensed instinctively. Family was territory he rarely discussed, even with people who'd known him for years. "Standard affluent upbringing," he said dismissively. "Private schools, European vacations, expectations of excellence." Ava's pencil stilled. "That's the biography from your company website. I'm asking about your family." The gentle but firm persistence caught Sebastian off guard. Most people accepted the polished narrative he presented. Few pushed for the reality beneath it. After a long moment, he spoke. My mother cared more about appearances than connection. My father valued achievement above all else. Family dinners were strategic planning sessions. Affection was conditional on performance. He hadn't intended to reveal so much, certainly not in such stark terms. The bourbon, perhaps, or something about the quality of light in Ava's studio, or more likely, the way she listened without judgment, had loosened his usual restraint. "And now?" Ava asked, her voice gentler. "Now my mother lives in our family estate in Connecticut, serves on charity boards, and calls when she wants to remind me of social obligations or potential marriage prospects from appropriate families." Ava set aside her sketchbook and moved to the windows. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the wooden floors, creating a moment of shared silence that felt neither awkward nor empty. "Show me your hands," she said suddenly, turning back to him. Sebastian hesitated, then extended them. Ava crossed the room and took them in hers, turning them palm up. Her touch was warm, her artist's fingers tracing the unexpected calluses on his palm. "You work with your hands," she observed, "not just signing documents." Sebastian almost smiled. "Rowing, since college, and I restore vintage cars, a hobby few people know about. Why hide it?" "It doesn't fit the narrative people expect from Sebastian Hawthorne," he admitted. "And you care what people expect," Ava challenged, still holding his hands. "Image has value in my world, and truth doesn't." Their eyes met, her question hanging between them. Sebastian became acutely aware of her proximity, the faint scent of paint and something floral in her hair, the warmth of her fingers still wrapped around his. "Truth is a luxury," he said quietly. "No," Ava countered, releasing his hands but maintaining her gaze. "Truth is essential. Everything else is the luxury." She returned to her chair, picking up her sketchbook. "Your grandmother's ring," she noted, gesturing to the heavy signet ring on his right hand. "You mentioned inheriting a fortune, but not that." Sebastian glanced down, surprised she'd noticed. Most people's eyes were drawn to his watch, a timepiece worth more than some homes. "How did you know it was hers?" "It's too delicate for a man's ring originally. It was altered to fit you." Ava resumed sketching. "And you touch it when you talk about family, like an anchor to something real." Sebastian had never realized this habit. The observation, intimate and perceptive, unsettled him. "She was different from my parents," he said, the words emerging unbidden. "She lived in France most of my childhood, but during the summers I spent with her, she taught me about art, music, philosophy, things my father dismissed as impractical. She believed in beauty for its own sake." For the remainder of their session, conversation flowed more easily. Sebastian found himself sharing stories of his grandmother's villa in Provence, of teenage summers spent learning to appreciate wine and literature rather than business strategies. Ava spoke of her own grandmother's garden in Georgia, of learning to mix colors by studying sunset skies, of the strength that had sustained her after losing her parents. When Sebastian finally glanced at his watch, he was startled to find that 3 hours had passed. "I've taken more time than agreed," he said, rising. "The creative process isn't always punctual," Ava replied, walking him to the door. "Thursday at 4? Sebastian nodded, suddenly reluctant to leave the warm, paint-scented space for his immaculate but sterile penthouse. At the threshold, he paused. "May I see what you sketched?" Ava hesitated, then handed him the pad. Sebastian found himself looking not at a traditional portrait, but at a series of studies. His hands, the curve of his shoulder, the angle of his jaw when he spoke of his grandmother. In each, she'd captured something he rarely saw in photographs of himself. An unguarded quality, hints of the person behind the polished exterior. "You see more than most people," he observed, returning the sketchbook. "That's my job," Ava replied simply. As Sebastian stepped into the crisp evening air, He realized that for 3 hours, he hadn't once thought about Hawthorne Industries, about acquisitions or stock prices or board politics. For 3 hours, he had simply been present, something he couldn't remember experiencing in years. Chapter 5. Whispers and Warnings. 3 weeks of sessions had transformed Sebastian and Ava's relationship from cautious professional exchange to something neither could define. Each Tuesday and Thursday, the billionaire arrived punctually at 4, gradually shedding his armor. Their conversations ranged from childhood memories to philosophical debates about art and purpose. Ava's sketches had evolved into a complex composition taking shape, abstract yet suggestive of two distinct worlds merging. Sebastian found himself thinking about these sessions during board meetings and merger negotiations. "You're distracted lately," Diana observed, placing contracts on his desk. Sebastian merely nodded. How could he explain that a paint-smudged artist in Brooklyn had somehow slipped past defenses built over decades? On a Wednesday, Sebastian canceled a dinner with investors to attend a gallery featuring one of Ava's friends. He spotted her across the room, laughing with artists, unaware of his presence. Something tightened in his chest at the sight of her. Confident, vibrant, genuine. Before he could reach her, a woman with close-cropped hair stepped into his path. "You're Sebastian Hawthorne. And you are Zoe Kwan, Ava's best friend." She assessed him with directness. "You're not what I expected." Sebastian's gaze returned to Ava. "Is that good or bad?" "Depends on your intentions. Ava's not an exotic adventure for a bored white billionaire. She's brilliant, she's fought for everything she has, and she deserves someone who sees that. Not just a beautiful black woman who challenges your worldview before you return to your comfortable existence." The accusation stung more than Sebastian anticipated. "You know nothing about me." "I know men like you see women like Ava as temporary fascinations," Zoe replied unapologetically. Before Sebastian could respond, Ava spotted him and approached. "Sebastian, I didn't expect you tonight." "Just supporting the arts," he replied, his composure regained. Zoe excused herself with a pointed look that Ava didn't miss. "What was that about?" she asked. "Friendly warning," Sebastian replied. "Your friend is protective." Ava studied him. "And does she need to be?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities. Sebastian found himself wanting to reassure her, to explain that whatever was happening between them mattered in ways he couldn't yet articulate. Instead, he simply said, "I'll see you tomorrow at 4, and left. The following afternoon, Ava was uncharacteristically quiet during their session. "Did I offend you last night?" Sebastian finally asked. Ava's brush paused. "Number. But Zoe reminded me how our worlds look from the outside. In my neighborhood growing up, men who looked like you were landlords raising rent or bankers denying loans." Sebastian nodded. "And in my circles, women who looked like you were expected to be grateful for inclusion." "Yet here we are," Ava said, something softening in her expression. "Here we are," Sebastian echoed, holding her gaze. That evening, Sebastian received a text from his mother requesting his presence at her Connecticut estate the following morning. Victoria Hawthorne received him in her sunroom, impeccably dressed, her silver hair perfectly arranged. "You've been seen with an artist," she began without preamble, rather publicly. Sebastian maintained his composure. "I'm commissioning a piece. From what I understand, commissions rarely require multiple private meetings. The family is concerned." "The family?" Sebastian's tone cooled. "Or you? Don't be obtuse, Sebastian. You're the face of Hawthorne Industries. Your choices reflect on all of us." "My personal life is my own concern." Victoria's laugh held no warmth. "Naivete doesn't suit you. This girl—woman," Sebastian corrected, "accomplished artist." This infatuation has consequences beyond your momentary fascination. The Bradfords were quite disappointed when you missed Eleanor's dinner party. I need to return to the city, Sebastian said, rising. I have meetings. Sebastian. His mother's tone stopped him at the door. Remember who you are? That afternoon, Sebastian arrived at Ava's studio to find her in conversation with an elegantly dressed woman he didn't recognize. Mr. Hawthorne, the woman greeted him. I was just leaving. Victoria speaks highly of you. Sebastian froze at the mention of his mother's name. The woman smiled and slipped past him, leaving a heavy silence. You should have told me your mother sent an emissary, Ava said quietly. I didn't know, Sebastian replied, shocked. What did she say? That I'm an extraordinary talent, that my exotic perspective must be refreshing for you, that the Hawthorne family has always supported diverse artists. The calculated condescension was unmistakably his mother's approach. She offered to connect me with more appropriate collectors. She mentioned a foundation that could fund a retreat for me in Paris starting next month. Sebastian's jaw tightened. I had nothing to do with this. Ava faced him, her eyes holding hurt. Your world is sending messages, Sebastian. First Zoe warning me, now your mother's friend. Everyone sees what we've been pretending not to see. And what is that? Sebastian asked. That whatever is happening between us can't survive in either of our worlds. This commission is becoming something else, something complicated. Is that a problem? Isn't it? Ava challenged. What happens after the painting is finished? You hang it in your penthouse, write a check, and we go back to our separate worlds? Or worse, you continue this fascination until the novelty wears off. What do you want from me, Ava? He finally asked. Honesty, she replied. About what this is, about where it's going. Sebastian stood at another precipice, one more frightening than any business negotiation he'd faced. I don't know what this is, he admitted. I only know I think about you when we're not together. I know our conversations are the only times I feel genuinely present in my own life. The confession hung between them. Ava's expression softened, but uncertainty remained. That's not enough, she said quietly. Not with everything stacked against us. Sebastian took her hands in his. Then we fight. Together. If what's growing between us matters enough. Does it? Ava asked, vulnerability naked in her question. Before Sebastian could answer, Ava's phone rang. She answered, her expression changing as she listened. I'll be right there, she said. Marcus collapsed. They've taken him to Mount Sinai. I'll drive you, Sebastian said immediately. In his car, Sebastian broke several traffic laws, getting Ava to the hospital, neither speaking until they reached the emergency entrance. You don't have to stay, Ava said. Sebastian caught her arm gently. I want to, if you'll let me. The simple truth in his words seemed to reach her. Together they stepped into the hospital, the question of what came next temporarily eclipsed by concern for her friend and mentor. Chapter 6. The Heart's Truth. Marcus's heart attack, though mild, forced a pause in Ava and Sebastian's complicated dance. For 3 days, Ava barely left the hospital. Sebastian appeared each evening with food neither woman had asked for, but both gratefully accepted, then joined Ava for late-night conversations in the sterile corridor. On the 4th day, with Marcus stable, Ava returned to her studio to find daily flower deliveries, thoughtful collections of Georgia wildflowers that reminded her of her grandmother's garden. No card, but she knew who sent them. Her phone contained a single text from Sebastian. When you're ready, no pressure. The simple message touched something in Ava that grand gestures never could have. Sebastian was learning her language, support without suffocation. She stood before the half-finished commission, seeing in it layers of meaning beyond the original concept. a visual record of their developing relationship with all its tensions and possibilities. A week passed. Ava visited Marcus daily, fielded calls from gallery owners, and contemplated the commission without touching a brush. The canvas reflected their relationship, two worlds beginning to merge, suspended in possibility. When Marcus was finally released, Ava helped settle him at home. Exhausted, she returned to her loft to find Sebastian sitting on the floor outside her door. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Sebastian rose, his appearance slightly rumpled. "I was worried about you." "I'm fine," Ava replied, though the dark circles under her eyes suggested otherwise. "Marcus?" "Home, recovering." She unlocked her door, hesitating before adding, "Would you like to come in?" Her studio felt different with Sebastian in it again, as if the space had been holding its breath. Ava moved to the kitchenette, needing the familiarity of making tea. "Thank you for the flowers," she said. "They reminded me of home. Your grandmother's garden. You mentioned it during our second session." The fact that he remembered such a detail weakened Ava's carefully constructed defenses. "Why are you here, Sebastian?" she asked, facing him directly. "Because I can't stay away," he admitted. "I've tried. It would be easier for both of us if I could." "Easier isn't always better." "No," Sebastian agreed, stepping toward her. "It isn't." The week of separation had clarified things for Ava. Marcus's brush with mortality had stripped away pretenses, leaving only what mattered most. "Your mother's friend was right about one thing," she said quietly. "This has complications written all over it." "I've spent my life avoiding complications," Sebastian replied. "It hasn't made me happy." "What would make you happy, Sebastian?" Instead of answering, he closed the distance between them, his hands gently framing her face. "May I?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ava's answer was to rise on her toes, meeting his lips with hers. The kiss began tentatively, before deepening into something that made her heart race. Sebastian's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since our second session." "What took you so long?" Ava murmured. "Fear," he admitted. "Not of rejection, but of how much I wanted it. How much I want you." The kettle whistled. Ava moved to turn off the heat. "Stay," she said simply, "not just for tea." Later, as moonlight spilled across her bed, Sebastian traced patterns on Ava's bare shoulder. Their lovemaking had surprised them both, not just in its intensity, but in its honesty. "What are you thinking?" Ava asked. "That I've never felt this way before," Sebastian answered. "That I'm terrified of how much this matters." "Why terrified?" "Because I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "My world has rules, structures, clear objectives. This, us, doesn't fit any category I understand. Does it have to? My whole life has been about control and certainty, and mine has been about finding beauty in uncertainty." Ava laid her palm against his cheek. "Maybe that's why we found each other." "What happens tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow we face reality," Ava replied honestly. "Your world, my world, and whatever this is between them. But tonight is ours." In the morning, Sebastian woke before dawn. This woman had somehow slipped past defenses built over decades, challenging his assumptions about himself, what he valued, who he could be beyond the identity he'd constructed. Carefully extracting himself, Sebastian wrote a brief note and quietly left. Outside, the city was just waking up. Instead of calling his driver, he walked, letting the cool morning air clear his head. By the time he reached his penthouse, he'd made a decision. Diana was surprised when he called at 6 a.m., requesting a rearrangement of his schedule for the next week. When she asked about the Shanghai merger negotiations, Sebastian replied, "They can wait." "They've been in process for months," Diana protested. "And they'll still be there next week," Sebastian said. Some things are more important. The words felt foreign in his mouth, a direct contradiction to the philosophy that had guided his career. Yet Sebastian felt lighter than he had in years, as if he'd set down a burden he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. That afternoon, he reappeared at Ava's studio carrying his overnight bag and a small wrapped box. "Your notes said you had meetings," she said, surprised. "I canceled them." Sebastian set down his bag. "I thought we could drive up to my grandmother's cottage in the Berkshires. It's peaceful there. We could talk without interference." "What's in the box?" Ava asked. Sebastian offered it to her. "Something Marcus helped me find." Ava unwrapped it to reveal vintage paintbrushes, handcrafted sable brushes from the 1940s. "They belonged to Eliza Mercer," Sebastian explained. "Marcus mentioned she was an influence on your early work." Ava's fingers hovered over the brushes reverently. Eliza Mercer had been a groundbreaking black female painter in the mid-20th century, largely unrecognized in her lifetime. The gesture moved Ava deeply, not because of the monetary value, but because Sebastian had listened so carefully to her conversations with Marcus, understanding what would matter to her professionally and personally. "This isn't something you could have just bought on impulse," she realized. "This took real thought." "I'm learning," Sebastian said simply, "about what matters to you, about what matters to me." "Let me pack a bag," Ava said, touching his face gently. "And Sebastian, I'm glad you came back." 3 hours later, they were driving north out of the city, leaving behind the expectations of their respective worlds. As Manhattan's skyline receded, Sebastian felt something unfamiliar yet unmistakable unfurling in his chest. Hope, not for some calculated outcome, but for the simple joy of discovery, of Ava, of himself, of possibilities neither had dared imagine before finding each other. Chapter 7. Under the Spotlight. The week in Sebastian's grandmother's cottage transformed them both. Nestled among maple trees just beginning their autumn display, the stone house was nothing like Ava had expected. Modest, warm, filled with books and art rather than ostentatious luxury. Here, Sebastian shed the last of his armor, cooking dinner in worn jeans, reading poetry aloud by the fireplace, sharing stories of the woman who'd shown him a different way to see the world. For Ava, watching Sebastian in this space revealed the man beneath the billionaire facade. Their connection deepened with each sunrise, spent talking over coffee on the porch, each evening tangled together beneath handmade quilts. Their return to New York felt like re-entering gravity after days of weightlessness. Sebastian dropped Ava at her studio with a lingering kiss before heading to face the work that had accumulated during his absence. 3 days later, Diana entered his office, tablet in hand. "You need to see this." The screen displayed multiple major outlets featuring intimate photos of Sebastian and Ava. The headlines ranged from suggestive to hostile. Hawthorne airs exotic new muse, art world romance, or cultural appropriation. Black artists, white knight, Sinclair finds billionaire patron. Crossing the color line, Hawthorne Dynasty's controversial new chapter. Sebastian's hands trembled with rage. Find out who supplied these photos. His phone rang. Ava. "Have you seen them?" she asked, her voice tight. "Just now. Ava, I'm so sorry. It's not just online," she cut in. "A reporter cornered me, asking if I felt like a diversity trophy. 2 galleries have called suggesting I capitalize on my newfound notoriety, with a show examining power dynamics in interracial relationships, as if my work suddenly matters only in relation to who I'm sleeping with." "Pack a bag," Sebastian said immediately. "I'm sending security." By evening, the story had exploded. Financial News questioned Sebastian's judgment. Art blogs debated whether Ava was compromising her artistic integrity. Social media erupted with polarized opinions, some defending their right to privacy, others analyzing the racial and class dynamics with academic detachment. Most disturbing were the hate messages flooding both their inboxes, racial slurs directed at Ava, threats against Sebastian for race mixing from white supremacist corners of the internet. When Sebastian's security team escorted Ava to his penthouse, the strain on her face made his heart ache. "This is beyond insane," she said. "They're treating us like characters in some racist morality play." "I've had my legal team contact every outlet publishing the most damaging content," Sebastian told her. "That won't make it stop," Ava said. "It just validates that we're worth talking about." The next morning, Sebastian was summoned to his mother's Manhattan apartment. Victoria Hawthorne sat rigidly, newspaper folded to an unflattering photo of him and Ava. "I warned you," she said. "I'm not here for lectures," Sebastian replied. "I'm here to tell you to call off your friends who are feeding these stories." "You're being naive," his mother countered. "These stories aren't from my friends. They're the natural consequence of a man in your position conducting a public affair with a woman so obviously—" "Choose your next words with extreme care," Sebastian interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. Victoria studied her son. "You care for this woman," she said, realization dawning. "Her name is Ava," Sebastian replied. "And yes, I do. More than I've ever cared for anyone. The board is concerned, Sebastian. There are rumors you've been distracted. I'm saying I won't choose between Ava and the company. I can lead Hawthorne Industries effectively while being with the woman I love. You would risk everything for her." Victoria's incredulity was genuine. "I'm not risking anything valuable," Sebastian replied, "just exchanging empty success for meaningful happiness." Meanwhile, Ava faced her own reckoning at a meeting with Marcus and the gallery's publicist. "This could actually work in our favor," the publicist was saying. "The controversy has people talking about your work who never would have noticed otherwise. So I should just let them reduce me to Sebastian Hawthorne's exotic girlfriend." Ava's frustration boiled over. "Let them pretend my 15 years of hard work mean nothing compared to who I'm dating. We can be strategic about this," Marcus suggested. "Your spring exhibition, we move it up, capitalize on the attention while redirecting it to your art. My exhibition isn't ready. The centerpiece isn't finished. The commission for Hawthorne." The publicist perked up. "Perfect. We can build the narrative around that." "No," Ava said firmly. "That piece is private. This meeting is over. My work is not a PR strategy. My relationship is not a marketing opportunity." Outside the gallery, Ava found herself surrounded by photographers. Questions flew from all directions, about Sebastian, about her background, about whether she felt she was being used as a diversity statement. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sebastian. "Are you okay? Where are you?" A sleek black car pulled alongside her, the door opening to reveal Sebastian himself. "Get in," he urged over the shouts of the photographers. Once inside, Sebastian pulled her close. "I'm so sorry about this." "It's not your fault," Ava said, though part of her wondered if that was entirely true. "I spoke to my mother," Sebastian said, his tone suggesting the conversation hadn't gone well. "And I just walked out on my agent and publicist," Ava countered. "Apparently, our controversial romance is great for business." "What do you need right now?" Sebastian asked. "Whatever it is, just tell me." "I need space to think," she admitted. "Not away from you, but from all of this." That evening, they boarded Sebastian's private jet, destination undisclosed to anyone outside his most trusted staff. 6 hours later, they landed on a small Caribbean island where Sebastian's family owned a secluded property. As they stood on the moonlit beach, waves lapping gently at the shore, Ava felt the knot of tension in her chest begin to loosen. "Better?" Sebastian asked, arms encircling her from behind. "Better," she agreed. But temporary. We can't hide forever. No, he conceded, but we can take the time we need to decide how to face it. Together. Is that what you want? To face it together, no matter how ugly it gets? Sebastian's answer was to kiss her with tenderness. I've spent my life facing things alone, he said when they parted. I don't want to do that anymore. Not with this. Not with you. Under a canopy of stars, they made promises neither had anticipated when this journey began. Promises of courage, of standing together against a world that would reduce their connection to spectacle or scandal. Chapter 8. Fractures. 3 days of Caribbean serenity ended with an urgent call from Diana. The board had called an emergency meeting regarding Sebastian's recent behavior and public image concerns. Their island sanctuary suddenly felt like borrowed time. I need to go back, Sebastian told Ava, finding her painting on the villa's terrace. Ava nodded. I know. We both do. Running never solves anything. They returned to New York that afternoon, the flight quiet as both prepared mentally for what awaited them. Sebastian dropped Ava at her studio before heading directly to Hawthorne Tower, pressing a lingering kiss to her lips that felt ominously like goodbye. Call me when you're done, she said. The boardroom was tense, 14 faces ranging from concerned to openly hostile. Sebastian took his place at the head of the table, outwardly calm despite his simmering anger. This meeting is about my personal life, not our quarterly performance, he began. Lawrence Stanfield, the eldest board member and closest thing Sebastian had to an ally, spoke first. It's about perception, Sebastian. The markets respond to stability. These tabloid stories, the racial component especially, will be forgotten in a week, Sebastian finished. This is different, Patricia Way countered. Your relationship is being portrayed in ways that could alienate potential partners. The deliberate pause before relationship told Sebastian everything about how they viewed his connection with Ava. I wasn't aware my personal choices required board approval, he said, his tone dangerously even. The next 2 hours were a carefully choreographed assault. Concerns about Sebastian's focus, suggestions that a cooling period might be advisable, veiled implications that Ava might be using him for publicity. Sebastian withstood it all with glacial control until Harold Whitmore suggested that this Sinclair woman might be adequately compensated to reduce her public association with the Hawthorne name. Enough, Sebastian's voice cut through the room. Ms. Sinclair is not for sale, nor is my private life. The company is performing at record levels despite, or perhaps because of, my recently improved personal happiness. As the room emptied, only Stanfield remained. Is she worth it? He asked. Yes, Sebastian said simply. She is. While Sebastian confronted his board, Ava returned to her loft to find it had been broken into. Her studio had been methodically searched, drawers left open, supplies scattered. Most disturbing, her self-portrait and Sebastian's commission had been slashed, clean, deliberate cuts that formed a crude X across each canvas. On the wall above her work table, spray-painted in black, "Stay with your own kind." Shaken, she called Zoe rather than Sebastian. Zoe arrived within minutes, taking charge of the police report while Ava surveyed the damage. This wasn't random, Ava said, examining the ruined paintings. Of course not, Zoe agreed grimly. Someone's sending a message. The police found no fingerprints, no security footage, just a professional job that left Ava feeling violated and suddenly vulnerable. When Sebastian arrived, his face darkened seeing the slashed canvases and racist message. Without a word, he made calls. Security consultants, contractors for improved locks, arrangements for a temporary studio in a secure building. You can stay at my place until this is resolved, he said, his tone leaving little room for discussion. And leave my home because someone tried to intimidate me? Ava challenged. That's giving them exactly what they want. This isn't about pride, Ava. It's about safety. It's about control, she countered. Mine, not yours. Their first real argument escalated quickly, Sebastian insisting on his resources as the obvious solution, Ava refusing to have her independence dictated by threats. You can't throw money at every problem, she finally snapped. Worse than having your work destroyed, your home invaded? Sebastian's frustration spilled over. What exactly am I supposed to do, Ava? Stand by while you're targeted because of your association with me? The phrasing struck her. My association with you. You know what I mean. Do I? Ava crossed her arms. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're seeing this as a problem to be managed, not a relationship worth fighting for differently. Before Sebastian could respond, his phone rang, Diana with news that a major investor was threatening to withdraw over character concerns. Take it, Ava said. It's clearly urgent. When he returned 10 minutes later, Ava had packed a small bag. Where are you going? He asked, alarm rising. To Zoe's. I need space to think. Ava, please, this is exactly what they want, to separate us. This isn't about them, Sebastian. It's about us. How we handle problems. How we make decisions. The fear that flashed across his face nearly broke her resolve, but Ava stood firm. I'm not saying it's over. I'm saying I need time. Sebastian wanted to argue, but forced himself to nod. Take whatever time you need. Alone in his penthouse that night, Sebastian confronted truths he'd been avoiding. His instinct to shield Ava with his wealth and power had backfired spectacularly. The very privilege he'd taken for granted had become a wall between them. The next morning, news broke that Sebastian had purchased controlling interest in the media company behind the most vicious coverage of their relationship. Within hours, the tone of their reporting shifted dramatically. When Zoe showed Ava the news, Ava felt sick. He bought an entire media company? Power move, Zoe commented, impressed despite herself. It's exactly what I told him not to do, Ava countered, throwing money at the problem instead of addressing the real issues between us. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sebastian. Can we talk? Ava stared at the message, tears welling unexpectedly. Not yet, she replied. I need more time. On the fourth day of their separation, Sebastian received a call from an unexpected source. Mr. Hawthorne, this is Marcus Klein, Ava's agent. Is she all right? Sebastian asked immediately. Physically, yes. Emotionally. Marcus paused. She's hurting and working herself to exhaustion. She asked for space. I'm trying to respect that. Admirable, Marcus said, but perhaps misguided. You're approaching this relationship like a businessman, not a lover. Buying media companies, sending security teams. These are power plays, not expressions of understanding. I'm trying to protect her. The greatest threat to your relationship isn't the media or vandals. It's your inability to see that Ava needs an equal, not a protector. The blunt assessment stung. What are you suggesting? That you consider what she actually wants, rather than what you think she needs. After the call ended, Sebastian sat for a long time, turning Marcus's words over in his mind. Meanwhile, Ava returned to her studio, newly secured but still feeling violated. Standing before the slashed commission, she felt a strange clarity. The painting had captured something true about their relationship, two worlds attempting to merge, full of beauty and possibility, but also inherent tension and conflict. She picked up a brush and began working on a new canvas, not attempting to recreate what was lost, but to express what she now understood more deeply. Love wasn't something pristine and protected, but something that survived damage, that persisted despite scars. Sebastian's phone chimed with a text from an unexpected source. "This is Zoe. She won't tell you this, but her birthday is tomorrow. She'll be at the Museum of Modern Art at 7 p.m., Rothko Room. She sits there every year. Do better this time." The following evening, Ava sat alone on the bench in the Rothko Room, allowing the massive color field paintings to wash over her. She sensed rather than saw Sebastian enter, taking the space beside her without touching, without speaking. "How did you know?" she finally asked. "Zoe told me." Sebastian kept his voice low. "I didn't bring a gift." Ava turned to look at him, surprised. "I wanted to," he continued. "Everything in me wanted to give you something spectacular. But I realized that's exactly the problem. I've been trying to solve us with resources instead of understanding. I sold the media company this morning," Sebastian added. "And I've informed the board that my personal life is non-negotiable." "I'm not finished," he said gently. "I've spent my life believing control equals safety. That vulnerability is weakness. That problems should be eliminated rather than worked through. I was wrong. And I'm sorry." The sincerity in his eyes, the genuine effort to understand rather than manage, began to mend the fracture between them. "I missed you," Ava admitted, "even while I was angry with you." "I missed you too," Sebastian replied. "Enough to try changing patterns I've relied on my entire adult life." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a piece of broken pottery mended with gold in the kintsugi tradition. The Japanese art of repairing broken things with gold, making them more beautiful because they've been damaged and restored. His fingers brushed hers. "It reminded me of us." Ava's breath caught that he had independently arrived at the same metaphor she'd been exploring in her painting. "I don't want to protect you from the world, Ava," Sebastian continued. "I want to stand beside you as you face it." Ava's hand found his between them on the bench, their fingers intertwining, a small gesture bridging the distance of the past week. "That's all I wanted," Ava said softly. "Partnership, not protection." Chapter 9. Separate Worlds. Reconciliation brought a honeymoon period, 3 weeks of tentative rebuilding, of Sebastian learning to consult rather than decide, of Ava accepting that his protective instincts came from love rather than control. They established new patterns, alternating between his penthouse and her studio, weekly dinners with Zoe and Marcus, Sunday mornings in museums where Sebastian showed Ava his favorite classical pieces, while she introduced him to emerging artists he'd never considered. Then reality intervened again. Sebastian needed to travel to Tokyo for critical negotiations that couldn't be delegated. Ava faced deadline pressure for her upcoming exhibition. 2 weeks, Sebastian said, packing his suitcase while Ava sketched him from the bed. "I'll call every day." "I'll be fine," she assured him. "The space might even be good for my work." The distance proved more challenging than either anticipated. Tokyo put Sebastian 13 hours ahead, making real-time conversations nearly impossible. His days filled with intense negotiations, her nights consumed by painting sessions that often lasted until dawn. 5 days into the separation, Ava received a call from the Whitney Museum's contemporary curator. "We're planning a special exhibition on art and identity in modern America," the curator explained. "Your work has been recommended as central to the theme." The opportunity was extraordinary, the kind career-altering validation artists dream about. The catch came later in the conversation. "We're particularly interested in your explorations of racial and economic dynamics," the curator continued. "Your recent experiences crossing social boundaries make you uniquely positioned to address these themes." The implication was clear. Her relationship with Sebastian had factored into their interest. Ava's stomach tightened. "I'd like to be considered for my work itself," she said carefully. "Of course," the curator assured her, though her tone suggested otherwise. Perhaps we could discuss over lunch next week. We'd love to see your newest pieces, especially anything addressing your current perspective. Ava hung up, feeling conflicted. The opportunity was genuine, but the context felt exploitative. When Sebastian called hours later, she didn't mention it, uncertain how to explain her complicated feelings. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Sebastian faced his own version of the same problem. During a dinner with Japanese executives, one made a pointed comment. "Your American artists are very beautiful, a pleasant diversion." The deliberate mistranslation of girlfriend to artists wasn't subtle. Sebastian corrected him firmly, but the message was received. His relationship was being viewed as a temporary amusement rather than a serious commitment. The incident left him unsettled, questioning whether he was being naive about the challenges they faced. Perhaps their worlds were too different, the external pressures too persistent. For the first time, doubt crept in, not about his feelings for Ava, but about whether love alone was enough to bridge their circumstances. Back in New York, Ava threw herself into her exhibition preparation, working relentlessly to silence her own doubts. The Whitney curator called again, pressing for a meeting. Art magazines requested interviews specifically about her unique position straddling elite and artistic communities. Zoe found her in the studio at 3 a.m., surrounded by canvases, eyes red from exhaustion. "This isn't healthy," Zoe observed, taking away Ava's brush. "When did you last sleep?" "I'm fine," Ava insisted. "The exhibition opens in 4 weeks. I need to finish." "This isn't just about the exhibition," Zoe said gently. "Talk to me." Ava's composure cracked. "Everyone wants to define me by my relationship. The Whitney, the magazines, collectors. Suddenly, I'm interesting because of Sebastian, not my work." Her voice broke. "Even worse, part of me wonders if they're right. Would I have these opportunities otherwise?" Zoe embraced her friend. "Your talent got you here. Sebastian may have accelerated some attention, but he didn't create your vision or skills." "But how do I separate them now?" Ava asked. "How do I know what's earned versus what's granted because of who I'm with?" The question had no easy answer. Across the ocean, Sebastian wrestled with similar concerns as he finalized agreements worth billions while feeling increasingly disconnected from what truly mattered. Their daily calls grew shorter, more superficial. Neither shared their deepest worries, creating a distance greater than mere geography. Then came the photo that shattered their careful avoidance. An art blog published a picture of Ava having lunch with a handsome black artist whose work was featured alongside hers in several shows. The caption insinuated she might be reconsidering her venture into privilege and returning to more culturally compatible connections. Sebastian saw it during a break between meetings, the knot in his stomach tightening. He recognized the man, Isaiah Reynolds, a sculptor whose work Ava genuinely admired. The lunch was undoubtedly innocent, but the publication's framing triggered every insecurity Sebastian had buried. When they spoke that night, the tension was palpable. "I saw the photo," Sebastian said, attempting casual indifference. "Isaiah wanted to discuss a potential collaboration," Ava explained, immediately defensive. "The article was deliberate provocation." "I know," Sebastian assured her, though part of him wondered if there wasn't some truth to the narrative, that Ava might eventually realize she fit better in her own world than in his. "Do you?" Ava challenged. "Because you sound like you're questioning me." "I'm questioning whether we were naive thinking this would get easier," Sebastian admitted. "Whether the constant pressure from all sides will eventually wear us down." The honesty hung between them across thousands of miles and cultural divides. "Maybe we were," Ava said softly. "Maybe we still are." The call ended without resolution, both lying awake in separate time zones, confronting the possibility that love, even one as genuine as theirs, might not be enough to overcome the worlds determined to keep them apart. The following day, Sebastian unexpectedly found an ally. Hiroaki Tanaka, the elderly founder of the company they were negotiating with, invited Sebastian to a private tea ceremony. "You seem troubled," the man observed as they knelt on tatami mats. "Not by our negotiations." Something about the man's perceptiveness broke through Sebastian's careful composure. He found himself explaining his relationship with Ava, the pressures they faced, his growing doubts. Tanaka listened attentively before speaking. "When I married my wife, her family was poor, mine wealthy. Society opposed us. Colleagues questioned my judgment." He smiled faintly. 53 years later, those same people claimed they always supported us. "What made it work?" Sebastian asked. "We built our own world," Tanaka said simply. "Not mine, not hers. Something new that belonged only to us." He studied Sebastian. "But this requires courage to step away from what is familiar, comfortable." The wisdom resonated deeply. Sebastian had been trying to integrate Ava into his existing life while protecting his position within it. Perhaps that was the fundamental mistake. That night, instead of their usual call, Sebastian sent Ava a handwritten letter via courier, his thoughts more carefully articulated than their strained conversations had allowed. He described Tanaka's advice, his own realizations, and a question: what would their own world look like if they designed it together? In New York, Ava received the letter while preparing for a meeting with the Whitney curator. Sebastian's vulnerable honesty moved her deeply. Rather than proceeding with her appointments, she canceled everything and retreated to her studio, where she began working on a new piece, painting through the night with a clarity she'd been missing for weeks. By morning, she had her answer, not in words, but in color and composition. She photographed the still wet canvas and sent the image to Sebastian with a simple message: "This is our world. Not yet perfect, still taking shape, but beautiful in its becoming." The painting showed two distinct spirals, one structured in cool blues and grays, one organic in warm earth tones, intersecting to create something new at their center, neither diminished by the connection but rather enhanced, transformed. In Tokyo, receiving the image during final contract signings, Sebastian felt something shift into place. They weren't naive after all, just pioneers mapping territory few had successfully navigated before them. He made two decisions immediately. First, to cut his trip short by 3 days. Second, to begin a conversation with his board about restructuring his role at Hawthorne Industries. If their relationship required creating a new world, he was prepared to reimagine his place in the old one. When Sebastian's private jet landed at Teterboro, Ava was waiting on the tarmac, an arrangement she'd made through Diana, surprising both women with her initiative. As Sebastian descended the stairs, their eyes met across the distance, both recognizing something had fundamentally changed during their separation. They'd entered it as two people trying to make their relationship fit within existing frameworks. They emerged understanding that true love didn't adapt to predetermined structures. It created new architecture altogether. "I missed you," Sebastian said, drawing her close. "I missed us," Ava replied, the distinction subtle but significant. That night, in her studio rather than his penthouse, they began sketching the outlines of their shared world, one where his resources served purpose beyond accumulation, where her art reached audiences without exploitation of her identity, where their love wasn't a novelty or statement, but simply the foundation upon which everything else would be built. It wouldn't be easy. Society doesn't readily accommodate those who challenge its categories. But as Sebastian watched Ava painting in the early morning light, her focus absolute, her talent undeniable, he understood what Tanaka had meant about courage. Some things were worth stepping away from the familiar to protect. Some connections justified creating new maps when existing ones proved inadequate. Their love was one of those rare things. Chapter 10. The Canvas Completed. Sebastian's return marked a turning point. Rather than resuming their previous routine, They embarked on deliberately building what Tanaka had called their own world. Sebastian moved most of his belongings to Ava's loft, preferring its warmth and authenticity to his sterile penthouse. Ava cleared half her studio space for him, recognizing his need for a work area that wasn't associated with Hawthorne Industries. What surprised them both was how naturally this integration occurred, as if they'd been designed to complement each other all along. 2 weeks before Ava's exhibition opening, Sebastian arrived at the studio with an unexpected proposal. "I've been thinking about our conversation in Tokyo," he said, joining her at the canvas she was finishing. "About creating something that's truly ours, not just fitting each other into our existing lives." Ava set down her brush, intrigued by the spark in his eyes. "What are you thinking?" The Hawthorne Foundation currently focuses on traditional philanthropy, hospitals, universities, cultural institutions. Sebastian unrolled architectural plans on her work table. "I want to redirect half its resources to a new initiative: community arts education and studio spaces in underserved neighborhoods." The concept renderings showed a renovated warehouse similar to Ava's building, but larger. Multiple floors of studios, classrooms, gallery space, and a residence program. Sebastian. Ava studied the plans, understanding the magnitude of what he was proposing. This wasn't just a project, it was a fundamental shift in his family's legacy. "You'd oversee the artistic direction," he continued. "I'd handle the organizational structure. Together, we'd build something that matters to both of us, that combines my resources with your vision." The proposal represented everything Ava had ever wanted professionally: meaningful impact, artistic integrity, and reach beyond elite galleries. That Sebastian had conceived it not as a gift to her, but as a shared purpose touched her deeply. "Your mother will hate this," she observed, though her smile took the edge off the words. "Undoubtedly," Sebastian agreed. "The board won't be thrilled either. I'm essentially announcing I have priorities beyond corporate expansion." Ava traced the outline of the building in the plans. "When did you start working on this?" "In Tokyo. Tanaka made me realize I've been trying to fit you into my existing framework rather than building something new together." Sebastian took her paint-stained hands in his. "This is me choosing us over expectations." That night, as they discussed the foundation plans in greater detail, Sebastian received a call from Diana. His mother had been admitted to the hospital after a minor stroke. Despite their complicated relationship, Sebastian rushed to Connecticut immediately, Ava by his side. Victoria Hawthorne looked smaller in the hospital bed, her formidable presence diminished by a paper gown and IV tubes. Her surprise at seeing Ava with Sebastian was evident, but tempered by her weakened state. "The doctors say it was minor," she told Sebastian, her speech slightly slurred. "No need for dramatic bedside vigils." "I came because you're my mother," Sebastian replied, taking the seat beside her. "Regardless of our differences." Victoria's gaze shifted to Ava, who stood slightly behind Sebastian. "And you brought her." "Ava," Sebastian corrected firmly. "Yes, she's important to me, which means she's here." Something in his unwavering tone seemed to register with Victoria. For perhaps the first time, she truly looked at the woman her son had chosen, not as an inconvenience or social liability, but as a person. "Well," she said finally, "since you're both here, you might as well sit down." It wasn't warm acceptance, but from Victoria Hawthorne, it was unprecedented concession. Ava took the chair Sebastian offered, maintaining a respectful distance while remaining present. The conversation that followed was cautious but civil. Victoria asked measured questions about Ava's upcoming exhibition. Ava responded with polite interest in Victoria's recovery prospects. Sebastian observed this careful dance with amazement, recognizing the significant effort from both women. When a nurse entered to administer medication that would make Victoria drowsy, she surprised them again. "You'll come to dinner," she said to Ava, somewhere between question and command. When I'm home, Sebastian can arrange it. I'd like that, Ava replied, recognizing the gesture for what it was, not acceptance yet, but willingness to try. In the car afterward, Sebastian seemed shell-shocked. In 38 years, I've never seen her make that kind of concession. Fear changes people, Ava observed. So does love. You think she's worried about losing me? I think she's realizing she already has, in some ways. Ava squeezed his hand, and deciding whether she's willing to adapt to keep what connection remains. The health scare shifted something in Sebastian as well. He accelerated his plans for the foundation, formalized his proposal to restructure his role at Hawthorne Industries, and most significantly, began discussions with Ava about a more permanent union. I'm not proposing yet, he clarified one evening as they discussed their future. That deserves its own moment, but I want you to know it's where I'm heading. Ava appreciated his transparency, the fact that he included her in the journey rather than presenting a fait accompli. It was evidence of how far they'd come from his initial controlling instincts. When you do, she replied, kissing him softly, my answer will depend on how you ask, not what you offer. He understood her meaning perfectly. No grand gestures, no public spectacles, no demonstrations of wealth. Just honest emotion and shared purpose. The night before Ava's exhibition opening, Sebastian visited her studio to find her standing before his completed commission, the piece that had begun their journey months ago. She'd restored it after the vandalism, but rather than erasing the damage, she'd incorporated it into the composition, using gold lacquer in the Japanese kintsugi tradition to highlight rather than hide the scars. It's finished, she said simply, stepping aside so he could see it fully. The painting had evolved far beyond its initial concept. What began as an abstract exploration of love had become a visual autobiography of their relationship. Two distinct worlds intersecting, their convergence creating something entirely new. The golden repair lines formed a map of sorts, pathways through conflict to deeper connection. Ava. Sebastian stood transfixed, seeing their entire journey rendered in color and form. It's extraordinary. It's us, she said quietly. Not perfect, not without damage, but stronger for having been broken and mended. He turned to her, overwhelmed by the realization that this brilliant, beautiful woman had seen him, truly seen him, from their very first meeting. Not the wealth or power or family name, but the person beneath it all, with all his flaws and possibilities. I love you, he said simply, the words inadequate for what he felt, but all language offered. I love you too, Ava replied, her eyes holding his. Enough to build something real with you, no matter what comes. The exhibition opening the following evening marked another milestone. The gallery hummed with New York's art world elite, critics, collectors, and the merely curious drawn by Ava's rising reputation. Sebastian stood proudly by her side, neither dominating her moment nor distancing himself from it, simply present as equal partner. Victoria Hawthorne made a brief but significant appearance, still moving carefully after her stroke but impeccably dressed. Her conversation with Ava remained formal but no longer hostile. When Sebastian unveiled their plans for the Hawthorne Sinclair Arts Initiative, Victoria's raised eyebrow was her only visible reaction. You're serious about this, she said to Sebastian privately. About her. About both, he confirmed. The initiative and Ava, they're my future. Victoria studied her son, the certainty in his expression, the quiet confidence so different from his previous driven ambition. You've changed, she observed. For the better, I think, Sebastian replied. His mother didn't agree or disagree, merely nodded before departing. It wasn't blessing, but it wasn't opposition either, a neutral space in which possibility existed. Later that night, Marcus pulled Ava aside, his eyes bright with emotion. You've done something remarkable here, my dear, both with your work and with our Mr. Hawthorne." "With Sebastian?" Ava questioned. "Indeed." Marcus nodded toward where Sebastian stood, deep in conversation with the community arts director from the Bronx. "I've known him peripherally for years through various philanthropic circles. He was always generous but detached, writing checks without engagement. Now look at him, passionately discussing arts access like a true believer." Ava watched Sebastian gesturing animatedly, his usual reserve replaced by genuine enthusiasm. "He's always had depth," she said. "He just needed permission to show it." "You didn't just give him permission," Marcus corrected gently. "You gave him reason." After the guests departed, Sebastian and Ava remained in the empty gallery, surrounded by her work. One painting remained covered, the commission he'd requested months ago about the meaning of love. "I kept it out of the exhibition," Ava explained, approaching the veiled canvas. "Some things aren't meant for public consumption." She removed the covering to reveal the completed work, their journey rendered in color and form, every struggle and triumph captured in brushstrokes. The golden repair lines gleamed under the gallery lights, transforming damage into decoration, weakness into strength. Sebastian stood before it, seeing their past and glimpsing their future in Ava's artistic vision. "It's perfect," he said simply. "Not perfect," Ava corrected, slipping her hand into his, "but truthful, and that's better." As they left the gallery, the commission carefully wrapped for transport to their shared home. Both understood that the canvas of their relationship had reached a turning point, not completion, for that would suggest an ending, but a milestone marking how far they'd come and hinting at the journey still ahead. Their path wouldn't be easy. Society, family expectations, and cultural differences would continue challenging their bond. But they'd created something neither had believed possible months earlier, a love strong enough to withstand scrutiny, resilient enough to recover from damage, and profound enough to transform them both into better versions of themselves. Like Ava's painting with its golden scars, they had become kintsugi lovers, more beautiful for having been broken and carefully, lovingly mended. Chapter 11. Family Ties. The success of Ava's exhibition catalyzed her career. Museum acquisition committees competed for her work, international galleries sought collaborations, and art publications hailed her as a voice defining this moment in American art. Sebastian observed her rising star with pride, untainted by ego, finding joy in her achievements separate from his influence. Meanwhile, Sebastian's board reluctantly approved his restructuring proposal, not out of enthusiasm for his vision, but because his ultimatum left little choice. He remained CEO, but delegated day-to-day operations to create space for the Hawthorne-Sinclair Arts Initiative. The business press questioned his shifting priorities, while social commentators debated whether love had softened his legendary focus or sharpened it toward more meaningful pursuits. 3 months after her stroke, Victoria Hawthorne hosted the annual Hawthorne Foundation Gala at the family's Connecticut estate. For the first time, Sebastian and Ava would attend as an official couple in the most traditional setting of his world. "Are you sure about this?" Ava asked as their car approached the imposing colonial mansion. "Your mother's invitation felt more obligatory than enthusiastic." Sebastian took her hand. "I'm sure about us. The rest is just geography and furniture." The estate's grand foyer bustled with New York's elite, old money families, corporate titans, politicians, and socialites whose approval Sebastian had once considered essential. Now they registered merely as obstacles between him and the bar. Victoria greeted them with cool composure, her only concession to her recent health scare a slight lean on an elegant cane. "Sebastian, Avenue how prompt." Her gaze lingered on Ava's dress, a stunning creation by a young black designer that honored the event's formality while remaining true to Ava's artistic sensibilities. Thank you for including me, Ava said with genuine grace. Family obligations extend to significant attachments, Victoria replied, the deliberately ambiguous phrasing making clear that while Ava had been invited, she wasn't yet considered family. Sebastian tensed beside her, but Ava squeezed his hand, a silent reminder that they'd anticipated this reception. They'd agreed. No confrontations tonight, no ultimatums, simply their presence as a united front spoke volumes. As they circulated, Ava noticed the subtle stratification of the crowd, who spoke to them, who avoided them, who watched with calculating interest. Eleanor Bradford, Sebastian's mother's preferred match for him, deliberately turned away when they approached. Lawrence Stanfield, however, engaged Ava in genuine conversation about her work, surprising her with his knowledge of contemporary art. Sebastian mentioned you're overseeing acquisitions for the new initiative, Stanfield said, referring to the Hawthorne Sinclair project. Bold choice, focusing on emerging artists from underrepresented communities. Not bold, necessary, Ava replied. Talent exists everywhere. Access and opportunity don't. Stanfield studied her thoughtfully. Victoria worried you would influence Sebastian toward impractical idealism. Perhaps she underestimated how practical your idealism actually is. The observation, coming from someone deeply embedded in Sebastian's world, validated what they'd been building together. Not a romantic fantasy, but a purposeful partnership. Dinner presented its own challenges, with Victoria seating Ava between a conservative senator and a diamond magnate with notoriously outdated views. Sebastian, placed across the table rather than beside her, watched with barely concealed tension as these men addressed Ava with condescending curiosity. Extraordinary to see the art world embracing such diversity, the magnate commented between courses. In my day, there were clearer distinctions between fine art and cultural expressions. Ava smiled pleasantly. Fortunately, art has always evolved faster than those distinctions, sir. That's what keeps it vital. Her measured responses to increasingly problematic comments, never hostile but never submissive, earned grudging respect from some observers and furious whispers from others. Sebastian watched his mother, noting these dynamics, her expression unreadable. After dinner, as the gathering moved to the ballroom for dancing, Victoria motioned Sebastian toward her private study. Ava nodded for him to go while she remained in conversation with Stanfield's wife, an unexpected ally with progressive views on arts education. You're making quite a statement tonight, Victoria said once they were alone, pouring herself a small sherry despite medical restrictions. I wasn't aware loving someone constituted a statement, Sebastian replied, declining a drink. Don't be deliberately obtuse. Victoria settled into her chair. You've brought a woman to the central family event who represents everything this family has traditionally avoided. Artistic rather than corporate, progressive rather than conservative, and yes, black rather than white. Every person in that ballroom is evaluating what this means for the Hawthorne legacy. Sebastian remained standing, his patience thinning. And what exactly does the Hawthorne legacy mean to you, Mother? Maintaining appearances? Accumulating wealth? Or actually contributing something meaningful to the world? Victoria's eyes narrowed at the challenge. You think your little arts project with Ms. Sinclair is more meaningful than what generations of Hawthornes have built. I think it might be the first truly meaningful thing I've done, Sebastian said quietly. Because it's authentic to who I am, not who I was expected to be. The honesty hung between them, Sebastian finally articulating what had remained unspoken throughout his adult life. Victoria's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Your father would have disapproved, she said, more observation than argument. Probably, Sebastian agreed, but my grandmother would have understood. The reference to his grandmother, whose artistic sensibilities had always been dismissed as eccentricity by the family, struck a chord. Victoria's gaze drifted to a small landscape on her desk, one of the few pieces she'd kept from her mother-in-law's collection. She was unconventional, Victoria conceded, but devoted to this family nonetheless. As am I, Sebastian said. I'm not rejecting our family by choosing Ava. I'm expanding what family can mean. Victoria studied her son, the certainty in his stance, the clarity in his eyes. For the first time, she seemed to recognize that the man before her had outgrown her ability to direct his path. You intend to marry her, she stated. Yes. There will be consequences. I'm prepared for them. Sebastian moved toward the door. The question is whether you're prepared to be part of our future or merely an observer of it. He returned to the ballroom to find Ava surrounded by a small group of younger guests, discussing her recent acquisition for the Museum of Modern Art. Her natural warmth and genuine passion had drawn them to her despite social boundaries that would typically have kept them apart. "Everything all right?" she asked when he rejoined her. "Better than expected," Sebastian replied, taking her hand. "Dance with me." As he led her onto the floor, the orchestra began a waltz. Sebastian's hand at her waist guided her confidently through steps she'd hurriedly learned via online videos the previous week. Other couples gave them a wide berth initially, creating an unintentional spotlight effect. "They're all watching," Ava murmured, acutely aware of the attention. "Let them," Sebastian replied, his focus entirely on her. "They're seeing the future." Gradually, other couples joined them, the dance floor filling until they were simply part of the elegant choreography rather than its focal point. When the music ended, Sebastian kept hold of Ava's hand and led her to the center of the room. "Sebastian?" she questioned, sensing something unplanned. He smiled reassuringly before turning to address the gathered guests, his voice carrying across the sudden hush. "Thank you all for joining us tonight in supporting the Hawthorne Foundation. As many of you know, this year marks a significant expansion of our mission." His gaze found his mother, who had returned to stand at the ballroom's entrance. The Hawthorne Sinclair Arts Initiative represents not just a new philanthropic direction, but a new chapter for our family's legacy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Sebastian continued. For generations, the Hawthorne name has been associated with financial success and social influence. Tonight, I'm prouder than ever of that name because it's becoming associated with something more valuable, purposeful impact driven by genuine passion. He turned to Ava, whose expression reflected surprise at being centered in this unexpected moment. None of this would be possible without the vision and integrity of Ava Sinclair, who reminded me that true worth isn't measured in acquisitions but in contributions. The silence in the room was absolute now, guests sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented in this traditional space. I've asked Ms. Sinclair to lead our initiative, not because of our personal relationship, but because her artistic judgment and commitment to authentic representation is unparalleled. I hope you'll all join me in supporting this new direction for the foundation as we work to ensure that artistic voices from all communities have the opportunity to be heard. The applause that followed was initially tentative, then gathering strength as Sebastian's allies, Stanfield prominent among them, demonstrated enthusiastic support. Victoria's response was more measured, a single nod that acknowledged the declaration without necessarily endorsing it. Later, as guests began departing, Sebastian and Ava found themselves momentarily alone in the mansion's extensive library. The formal announcement of their professional partnership at such a significant family event had effectively declared their personal union as well, though not in the way either had anticipated. "That wasn't what I expected tonight," Ava admitted, running her fingers along leather-bound volumes that had witnessed generations of Hawthorne history. "Too public?" Sebastian asked, concerned he might have overstepped. "No," Ava reassured him. "Just significant." You essentially told everyone that I'm part of your family's future. Because you are. Sebastian approached a glass display case containing Hawthorne family heirlooms. I'd planned something more private for this, but tonight clarified something for me. He unlocked the case with a small key from his pocket and removed a simple gold band set with a modest diamond surrounded by sapphires. This was my grandmother's, he explained, holding it carefully. Not her engagement ring. That was appropriately ostentatious, as family tradition demanded. This was her personal ring, the one she actually chose for herself. Ava's breath caught as she understood what was happening. Sebastian. I'm not asking yet, he clarified, returning the ring to the case. That moment deserves to be completely ours, away from all this. But I wanted you to see it, to know that when I do ask, it will be with something that represents my real heritage, not just the Hawthorne fortune. The vulnerability in his expression, the earnest desire to share something genuinely meaningful rather than impressive, moved Ava deeply. She reached up to touch his face, a tender gesture witnessed only by centuries of books and family portraits. When you ask, she said softly, remember that I fell in love with you, not your name or legacy. Just you. Their kiss, surrounded by the most traditional symbols of Sebastian's world, felt revolutionary, a promise that the future they were building would honor what was valuable from the past while refusing to be limited by its constraints. As they prepared to leave, Victoria approached them in the foyer. Her expression remained composed, but something in her manner had shifted subtly. The foundation announcement was unexpected, she said to Sebastian, but effectively delivered. The board will expect detailed plans. They'll have them, Sebastian assured her. Victoria turned to Ava, studying her with new consideration. My son rarely changes course once set. That he has done so significantly since meeting you suggests you possess qualities I may have been too quick to dismiss. The statement, not quite apology, not quite acceptance, but something bridging both, surprised Ava. Thank you for hosting us tonight, Mrs. Hawthorne. Your home is beautiful. Victoria, the older woman corrected, the concession significant. And perhaps you might both join me for lunch next week. There are family matters we should discuss if future arrangements are being contemplated. Sebastian's expression registered shock at this unprecedented invitation. We'd be honored, he replied before Ava could respond. As they drove back to the city that night, the Connecticut estate receding behind them, Ava rested her head on Sebastian's shoulder, contemplating the evening's significance. Your mother will never fully approve, she said realistically. No, Sebastian agreed, but she's recognized she can't change what matters to me. For Victoria Hawthorne, that's substantial progress. Ava laughed softly, the sound both amused and affectionate. Our families could not be more different. My grandmother would have welcomed you with peach cobbler and embarrassing childhood stories. I wish I could have met her, Sebastian said, genuine regret in his voice. She would have seen past your wealth immediately, Ava mused. She had a gift for recognizing what people needed, rather than what they owned. And what would she have thought I needed? Ava considered this, memories of her grandmother's wisdom surfacing. Someone who saw you, not just your name. Someone who challenged you to be authentic, not just successful. She looked up at him. Someone who loved you for reasons you hadn't been valued before. Sebastian's arm tightened around her. Someone like you? Maybe, Ava acknowledged. Or maybe she would have sent you packing with a piece of her mind. Their shared laughter filled the car as they crossed the Triborough Bridge, Manhattan's skyline glittering before them, a vista that had once represented Sebastian's kingdom and Ava's professional battlefield, now transformed into the shared landscape of their future. The evening had marked another milestone in their journey, not just Sebastian's public alignment of his family legacy with their relationship, but Ava's willingness to find her place within that complex history without surrendering her own identity. Neither had compromised who they were. Instead, they'd expanded what was possible for both. Chapter 12. Unbreakable. 2 months after the Hawthorne Gala, Sebastian took Ava to the Georgia coastline, claiming a need to understand her roots before their future could truly begin. He'd arranged for a private beach house on a secluded stretch of shore, reminiscent of the setting in her self-portrait, yet infused with the warmth of her southern heritage. "I have something to show you," he said on their second evening, taking her hand as dusk painted the sky in shades her artist's eye catalogued instinctively. Indigo, vermilion, gold. They walked barefoot along the shore until they reached a hidden cove where Ava stopped, breath catching in her throat. Before them stood a perfect recreation of her grandmother's garden, every flower, every arrangement exactly as it had been in Willow Creek, transplanted to this coastal sanctuary. Black-eyed Susans nodded in the gentle breeze beside purple coneflowers and climbing roses that had been her grandmother's pride. "Sebastian," she whispered, moving through the blooms with trembling fingers, "how did you—" "Your childhood photos," he explained, watching her face with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "And Zoe helped with details you'd mentioned over the years. It took 3 landscapers working around the clock, but I wanted her here with us, in spirit, if not in person." Tears blurred Ava's vision as she realized the magnitude of this gift. Not the expense or logistics, but the profound understanding of what truly mattered to her. This wasn't a grand gesture fueled by wealth, but an intimate one born of careful attention and genuine love. At the garden's center stood a small wrought iron table set with 2 glasses and her grandmother's peach cobbler recipe, prepared exactly as Eleanora Sinclair had made it. Sebastian led her to the table as hundreds of tiny lights illuminated around them, woven through the flowers like earthbound stars. "When I first saw your self-portrait," Sebastian began, his voice deepening with emotion, "I recognized something in you that I'd been searching for my entire life without knowing it. Not just beauty or talent, but authenticity. A soul brave enough to stand at the edge and gaze into the unknown while remaining completely, uncompromisingly true to itself." He took her hands across the table, his thumbs caressing her artist's fingers, calloused from years of brushwork. "These hands," he continued, bringing them to his lips, "have created worlds I never knew existed. They've painted truth when I'd grown accustomed to facades. They've touched parts of me no one else has ever reached." His kiss against her palm sent electricity spiraling through her body. "I want these hands intertwined with mine for the rest of my life." Sebastian moved from his chair to kneel before her, not in supplication but in profound respect, withdrawing not a velvet box but his grandmother's ring, the gold band catching the garden lights in a constellation of reflected stars. "Ava Sinclair," he said, voice breaking with emotion. "You've transformed me in ways I never thought possible. You didn't just allow me into your world. You helped me find my true self in the space between our worlds." His eyes, usually so controlled, shimmered with unshed tears. "Will you marry me? Not the man I was when we met, but the man you've helped me become." Ava pulled him up to her, cradling his face between her palms. "You broke through every wall I built to protect my heart," she whispered against his lips. "Not with your wealth or power, but with your courage to be vulnerable, to change, to build something real alongside me, rather than asking me to adapt to your existing life." She kissed him with a passion that spoke more eloquently than words, her body melting against his as it had from their first embrace, yet deeper now with the knowledge of all they'd overcome. "Yes," she breathed when they finally parted. "Yes to us. Yes to the future we'll create together." Sebastian slipped the ring onto her finger, his grandmother's legacy finding new life in their union. As he gathered Ava into his arms, the ocean crashed against the shore in primal rhythm, a soundtrack to their souls' recognition of each other. Their kisses deepened, hands exploring with both the familiarity of lovers who knew each other's bodies intimately and the reverence of those discovering something precious anew. Sebastian lifted her into his arms, carrying her through the garden toward the beach house, unwilling to break their connection even briefly. "Wait," Ava said suddenly. "I have something for you too." When Sebastian set her down, she led him to a covered easel she'd positioned earlier in the day, hidden among the dunes. With hands that trembled slightly, she unveiled her creation, a reimagining of her self-portrait that had begun their journey. In this version, the solitary woman no longer stood alone, gazing at distant horizons. Now, two figures stood hand in hand, her face turned to his to hers, the ocean before them representing not isolation, but infinite possibility. Most striking was the light, breaking through storm clouds with golden rays that illuminated their joined silhouettes. "I've been painting this since our first real argument," Ava confessed, "because even when I doubted our path, my heart knew its destination. Not in solitary contemplation of what might be, but in the certainty of standing beside you through whatever comes." Sebastian's fingers hovered over the canvas, tracing the lines where the two figures merged without touching the still-drying paint. "You saw our future before I could name it," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "Artists see possibilities," Ava replied, pressing her palm to his chest where his heart thundered beneath her touch, "especially when we're painting from love." Their return to the beach house became a sensual journey, clothes discarded along the path as need overwhelmed restraint. Inside, Sebastian laid Ava across white sheets with reverent care before covering her body with his own. Their lovemaking transcended physical pleasure, becoming a communion of souls completely vulnerable to each other. Sebastian worshipped every inch of her deep brown skin, with lips and hands that spoke devotion in a language more ancient than words. Ava met his passion with equal fervor, her body arching into his touch, her hands mapping the terrain of his body as if committing it to eternal memory. "I never knew it could be this way," Sebastian confessed between kisses that traced fire along her throat, "that I could feel so completely exposed, yet absolutely safe." "This is what happens when souls recognize each other," Ava answered, guiding him deeper, their bodies joining in perfect harmony that drew gasps of wonder from them both. Their passion built like ocean waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes overwhelming, but always drawing them inexorably toward shared completion. When release finally claimed them, it was with a spiritual intensity that left them trembling in each other's arms, breathless with the recognition of something transcendent in their union. As moonlight spilled across their entwined bodies, Sebastian traced the curve of Ava's spine with tender fingers. "My mother always taught me that vulnerability was weakness," he murmured against her hair. "You showed me it's actually the greatest strength, to be fully seen and still loved." Ava propped herself on his chest, her eyes reflecting starlight from the windows. "My grandmother used to say that real love doesn't find you when you're perfect. It finds you when you're ready to grow beyond who you've been." Sebastian tucked a curl behind her ear, his touch feather-light against her cheek. "And have we grown enough, do you think?" "We've only begun," Ava said with a smile that promised a lifetime of evolution together. "That's the beauty of what we found. It's not static. It breathes and changes while remaining unshakable at its core." They made love again as dawn approached, slower this time, each touch a deliberate celebration of the journey that had brought them here. Every struggle, every triumph, every moment of growth. As the first light of day painted Ava's skin in golden hues, Sebastian gathered her against his heart. "Of all the treasures I've possessed," he whispered against her temple, "nothing compares to your unbreakable devotion. You've given meaning to wealth that once felt hollow, purpose to power that once felt empty, and love to a heart that had forgotten how to feel. Ava traced the strong line of his jaw, her eyes holding his with fierce certainty. And of all the beauty I've tried to capture on canvas, nothing compares to what we've created together. A love powerful enough to transform both our worlds into something new. They stood together on the balcony as sunrise set the ocean ablaze, Ava wrapped in Sebastian's arms, her head resting against his chest, where his heartbeat matched her own. The ring on her finger caught the morning light, generations of love continuing through their union. Nora was right, Ava murmured, naming her grandmother with tender reverence. When love is real, it reshapes everything it touches. It doesn't erase differences or pretend obstacles don't exist. It simply makes them part of a larger, more beautiful picture. Sebastian's arms tightened around her waist, his lips finding the sensitive spot beneath her ear that made her shiver with renewed desire. "Your grandmother would be proud of you," he said, "not for finding love, but for having the courage to fight for it, for refusing to let anyone, including me, define its boundaries." Ava turned in his embrace, her body fitting against his with perfect familiarity. "And your grandmother would be proud of you for becoming the man who values truth above appearance, growth above comfort, love above empire." Their kiss deepened as the day bloomed around them, passion flaring again with undiminished heat. Sebastian lifted Ava into his arms, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her back to their bed, unwilling to waste a moment of this sacred time together. "I want you," she breathed against his neck, her teeth grazing his skin. "Again, always." "You have me," Sebastian vowed, laying her across the rumpled sheets with reverent care before covering her body with his own. "Today, tomorrow, for every moment we're granted in this life." As they moved together in the golden morning light, their bodies speaking promises their hearts had already made, Ava knew with bone-deep certainty that her grandmother had been right all along. True love, when found, is indeed unwavering, passionate, and worth fighting for with every breath. And in Sebastian's arms, surrounded by the scent of southern flowers and sea air, she understood the final wisdom her grandmother had shared before passing. That when two souls are truly meant to find each other, no barrier, not wealth or status, not race or background, not society's judgment or family's disapproval, can prevent what destiny has already written in the stars. Their love, tested by fire and strengthened through adversity, had emerged not merely intact but transcendent, a force as powerful and eternal as the ocean itself, and just as impossible to contain. Unbreakable, like the devotion that had brought them to this perfect moment, where past and future merged in a present, filled with nothing but their absolute connection to each other. Two souls who had found home not in separate worlds, but in the beautiful world they'd created together.